If you're buying a home in the New Jersey suburbs of New York City, whether that's Summit, Westfield, Millburn Short Hills, Chatham, Madison, Morristown, Maplewood, South Orange, or really anywhere within about an hour of Manhattan, you're going to face this question. Which inspections should I actually invest in? Because here's the truth. In our market, inspections are not just about safety, they're strategic. The wrong approach can cost you the house, and the wrong assumptions can cost you thousands after closing. So today, I'm going to walk you through exactly how I guide my buyers through this, what's essential, what's situational, and how to think like a sophisticated homeowner, not just a nervous first-time buyer. By the end of this video, you'll know which inspections are non-negotiable, which ones depend on the town and the home, and how to protect yourself without sabotaging your offer. A few years ago, I had buyers relocating from Brooklyn to Westfield, a beautiful 1920s colonial. Fresh paint, updated kitchen, it looked perfect. They assumed the home inspection would just be a formality. It wasn't. The utility flue in the chimney was cracked. There was evidence of knob and tube wiring, and the underground oil tank, which the sellers were unaware of, turned into a $20,000 remediation. Now, here's the key. None of those were deal breakers, but knowing about them before closing completely changed their negotiation strategy. Instead of panic, we had leverage. And that's what inspections are about in this market: leverage, clarity, and protection. If we haven't met yet, hi, I'm Victoria Canizzo, and I'm a real estate specialist based in the New Jersey suburbs of New York City. Today, I'm going to talk to you about, number one, the standard home inspection, what it actually covers and what it doesn't. Number two, oil tank sweeps, especially critical in many of the towns in this area. Number three, radon testing, when it matters. Number four, sewer line inspections, which is the one most buyers forget about. Number five, termite and wood destroying insect inspections. Number six, when to consider structural or specialty inspections. Number seven, how inspections impact negotiation strategy in a competitive New Jersey market. Let's start with the foundation. A general home inspection in northern New Jersey typically includes the entire house. So the roof, the foundation, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, appliances, visible structural elements. But here's what buyers often misunderstand. It's a visual inspection. Inspectors are not opening walls, so they can't predict the future lifespan of systems. They can tell you the age of them and the type of maintenance you should be prepared for, but they won't guarantee perfection. They identify material defects and safety concerns. So in towns like Maplewood and South Orange, Short Hills, or Summit, where homes can be 80 to 150 years old, your inspection report is going to be long. It doesn't mean that the house is bad. It means it's old, and there's many things that the inspector can coach you on about maintenance. But this is also where I coach my buyers to differentiate between cosmetic aging, maintenance items, true structural concerns. Later, I'm going to show you how we decide what to actually negotiate. But my biggest tip is to choose an inspector who knows the older North Jersey housing stock. It can't be someone who only inspects new builds. This is where my resources come into play with my buyers. I've spent 13 years vetting all of my service providers, and I am very confident in the inspectors who now I recommend to almost every client. Okay, oil tank sweep. This is very critical in many New Jersey towns. If you're buying in our area, this is an inspection that I will not let my buyers skip. Many older homes originally had underground oil tanks. So even if the home is now converted to gas, an abandoned tank may still be underground. When these conversions first started, the township would allow homeowners to decommission a tank by having it emptied and then filled with sand or foam and still leave it in the ground. However, let's think about this. Depending on how the tank was emptied and cleaned, if any residual oil was left, what happens when groundwater entered the tank? Well, what happens when oil and water are mixed? Oil rises to the top, and if it's at the top of the buried tank, then where do you think it's going to go? Yeah, that's right, into the ground. So here's where we started having issues with tanks that were decommissioned and left in the ground. This is no longer acceptable, by the way. The DEP gets involved when you have a tank still in the ground with any evidence of soil contamination. And the process to get it removed and get the soil remediated can be long and expensive. And if you didn't know about this and you find a tank that has leaked into the soil, you now own the remediation. So this is something we need to be sure about before you close on the house or finish your home inspection contingency. An oil tank sweep uses ground penetrating radar to detect buried tanks. It usually costs about a few $100s, but your risk if you skip this is potentially tens of thousands of dollars. I've seen $8,000 removals, $25,000 soil remediations, and I've definitely seen deals collapse because this wasn't investigated early. I've even seen houses that had a secondary tank where the sellers, upon purchasing their house, found a tank and negotiated with the sellers before them to have it removed. And then when my buyers came along, they found another tank. So we really want to make sure that your property is clear of any underground oil tanks. This is not optional in older townships. Number 3, radon testing, especially in northern New Jersey. Radon levels in parts of Union County, Essex County, Morris, and Somerset County can run high. If you've never heard of radon gas before, it's a naturally occurring radioactive gas that's odorless and invisible. To get super technical, it's produced when uranium, thorium, or radium in rock, soil, and groundwater break down. So it can seep from the soil and rock into the air and enter buildings through foundation cracks, floors, walls, and gaps around pipes, where it can accumulate indoors, and it's very toxic. Good news, it's really easily mitigated. The cost of a radon test is under $200. I recommend this for every buyer, unless they're buying a condo that's up a couple of levels, or potentially if it's on a slab, but even in those cases, I've had people do radon tests. The mitigation, if it's needed, if the radon levels are higher than the allowable amount, is usually around $2,500. Definitely depends. I've also seen this occur very interestingly in new construction. So I had a buyer who purchased a house in Morris Township that had been built, I think, 7 years prior. Now, it's the current building code to install a passive system when you're doing new construction. So they'll do a radon test, but they actually already have the system without the fan installed, because it sometimes takes a couple of years for the radon to build up to a level where it shows up on a test. So this is a very good example. It had been built 7 years prior. The sellers had only been living there for 4 years. When they purchased, they did a radon test. So there had been a test when the house was finished, another test when these sellers purchased. Totally fine, within the allowable amount. My buyers did a test and the radon levels were higher than allowable. Luckily, because there's a passive system, that was a very inexpensive fix. This is something that comes up even in new construction. Number 4, sewer line inspection. I always tell my buyers that a sewer line inspection is comparable to a colonoscopy of the house. This is something we definitely want to see, because when you take possession of your house, you own everything from your property to where it meets the city line. Okay? So if there's a big problem with your sewer line, we really want to know this beforehand. In older towns, again, Short Hills, Millburn, Summit, Maplewood, Westfield, South Orange, we can continue to list these. Many homes still have clay sewer lines or cast iron pipes. They can have root intrusion risks. And a sewer scope actually involves sending a camera down into the line to meet the city main in the street, so we can really see the whole line. Why does this matter? Because replacing a sewer line can cost from $10,000 up to $50,000, maybe higher. It depends on the depth and the distance and what needs to be excavated around there. And it won't show up in a standard home inspection. There are still realtors in my market who don't recommend this inspection to buyers. And in fact, I helped buyers purchase a home in Summit in 2024 from sellers who had bought the house only 5 years prior to that, and their agents didn't recommend a sewer line inspection. My buyers listened to my recommendation, and we found a mostly clay line that was structurally unsound. This is not uncommon with clay pipes, which were used very often in the early 1900s because cast iron was not as readily available. There's some positives to clay lines. They're very durable and they don't corrode easily. So the interior of a cast iron pipe is much more prone to basically rust. They call it scale. That doesn't happen in clay pipes. But clay pipes only come in short segments. So they have joints between each segment. And that's where we have issues because over time, those joints can shift and even open. So back to the Summit house, the run of this clay pipe from where it started outside of the house to the city main was over 100 feet long. I ended up negotiating a $30,000 credit for my buyers towards the repair. In 13 plus years, I can tell you this is one of the most underutilized protective inspections in our area. So if you're buying a home that was built before 1980, I strongly consider this inspection. Number 5, termite and wood destroying insect inspections. In New Jersey, termites are common. This is usually a relatively inexpensive inspection. And here's what I tell my buyers. Presence of termites is not unusual and very easy to remediate with a termite treatment. However, it's active structural damage that we want to watch for because then we need to bring in a specialist, a structural engineer, to assess the damage and what needs to be done to rectify the damage. Again, this is not about fear, it's about information. Number 6, structural or specialty inspections. When do you bring in a structural engineer? Well, I just told you one time. A chimney specialist, a roofing contractor, a mold specialist, a water remediation company. And the answer is when the general inspection flags something beyond their scope. So in our market, I see specialty inspections most often for settling foundations, masonry chimneys in pre-war properties, flat roofs in mid-century designs, finished basements with past water intrusion. This is where experience matters. A less experienced agent might not be able to recommend people who are truly vetted. We don't want alarmists. We want people who are very savvy at what they do and can give us really great information. Not only the inspection information, because as soon as you find something that's actually wrong, you're going to need to back up that claim with an estimate. Again, these resources are everything in this process. A less experienced agent might escalate everything. A seasoned local agent will know which concerns are common and manageable and which are red flags. I have negotiated hundreds of inspection resolutions. The biggest mistake I see buyers make is overreacting to age rather than focusing on function and safety. Let's talk about inspection strategy in competitive New Jersey markets. I've talked about this before in other videos, but I want to add a strategic layer. In hot markets, which we frequently see in towns like Millburn, Short Hills, Summit, and Westfield, buyers almost always waive something towards the inspection contingency. It doesn't mean that they're skipping or waiving their inspections. It means that they're agreeing not to negotiate unless there are major structural or environmental defects. And even if those defects arise, that they're only going above a certain threshold. So I always explain to buyers that that's like their deductible. If we don't find anything wrong with the home, that deductible doesn't come into play. But if we do find something major, you have to understand that you're going to be negotiating above your waiver amount. But this really makes strong offers. Here's the key. You need to understand your own risk tolerance. I do not recommend waiving the inspections completely, but strategic limitation of the inspection contingency is so common in multiple offer situations that it's a given you will have to do this. That's why understanding which inspections truly matter can help you structure your offer more intelligently. How to think about inspections like a savvy buyer. Instead of asking what can go wrong, ask what risks can I quantify before I close. In the New Jersey suburbs, older homes are normal and imperfect inspection reports are also normal. In fact, I'm surprised when they're less than 150 pages long. But remember, the goal is not to find a perfect house. The goal is to understand what you're buying. Here are some common buyer mistakes I see over and over again. Number 1, thinking that a long report means a bad house. Number 2, skipping an oil tank sweep or a sewer line inspection in older neighborhoods. Number 3, overreacting to minor items. Number 4, using inspections emotionally instead of strategically. I have helped buyers avoid six-figure mistakes, and I've also helped them win homes in competitive markets because we approach inspections intelligently. If you're thinking about buying in any of the towns I mentioned or other towns within an hour of New York City, comment your town below and I'll tell you what inspections I prioritize first there. Also, if you're planning on selling in the next year, you should watch this too, because understanding buyer inspection psychology helps you prepare your home strategically. Final recap. If you're buying in the New Jersey suburbs of New York City, here is your inspection priority framework. Number 1, standard home inspection, always. Number 2, oil tank sweep. Absolutely critical. Number 3, radon testing, especially in northern New Jersey. Number 4, sewer line inspection, something I highly recommend in pre-1980 homes. Number 5, termite inspection. Number 6, specialty inspections. This will almost always include a chimney level 2 if the house has a chimney. Inspections are not about fear. They're about clarity. And in our market, clarity creates leverage.